Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority, also known as the FCAA, is marking World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is today, with our Spot and Stop Senior Scams webinar, which contains information for seniors and friends, family, and caregivers on how to spot, stop, and report common senior scams. My name is Lena Guthrie, and I'm a communications consultant with the FCAA, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'll share some quick housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded and shared to our YouTube channel. Everyone's cameras and microphones have been disabled by default. However, if at any point you have a question or would like to participate in the discussion, please feel free to unmute yourself. Alternatively, you can also type a question into the text chat that I'll be able to see, no problem. The audience is encouraged to ask questions throughout the presentation, and there will also be some dedicated time at the end as well. We'll be covering a variety of topics today, including who is the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority, the changing landscape of frauds and scams, regulated professions in Saskatchewan, how to spot scams, key takeaways. We will share some real fraud cases, as the unfortunate reality is that fraud can happen to anyone, how to report a fraud, and then some dedicated time for questions at the end. Before I turn it over, I'm excited to introduce our two speakers today, Harvey White and Shawn Cook. These two seasoned experts from the FCAA have decades of experience protecting Saskatchewan residents from scams and frauds. Harvey White is the Director of Enforcement with the Securities Division of FCAA. He has been involved with law enforcement for 27 years and is an accredited certified fraud examiner. He manages a team of highly skilled investigators who are charged with the detection and investigation of breaches of security laws in Saskatchewan. Turning to Shawn, who hails from small town New Brunswick, he has spent his career primarily in the areas of management and staff training and development. In 2009, Shawn joined the RCMP as an investigator and spent most of his time policing career providing frontline service to many rural locations in Saskatchewan in 2016, when he took a new challenge and was promoted to the RCMP Training Academy in Regina as an instructional facilitator. Shawn now serves the people of Saskatchewan as Director of Enforcement for the Consumer Protection Division of our organization. And I will now turn it over to Harvey White to talk about who the FCA is and what we can do for you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy that you could join us today, and it's a privilege to talk about this with people. I'll talk a little bit about our organization initially. So FCAA is the Saskatchewan's financial regulatory body. We oversee the licensing, registration, audit and compliance, market conduct, and complaint handling and enforcement. Educating the public on how to protect themselves and their money is another key aspect of what we do. Okay. So things have changed over the years from when I first got into this business. These fraud people are insulated by anonymity, distance, and speed. Fraudsters are now able to reach victims worldwide, receive and transfer funds, and disappear quite easily, leave little trace of their activity, create instant investment companies on websites in a matter of hours, and appear to be very legitimate and established. They also can, unwittingly, victims can feel they are dealing with a local business that may in fact be in another continent, like they could be anywhere in the world. The FCAA, as I said, was the regulatory body, and we do. Excuse me. I think this was Shawn's, right?
That's correct. We have Shawn talking about regulated professions in Saskatchewan next. Thank you, Harvey.
I was getting carried away here.
Thank you, everybody. So yeah, we have two types of businesses in Saskatchewan. We have regulated designated activities, which means that they have to be licensed through our office in order to operate within their specific industry. And we have the ones that are not. So some of the most common ones that we see here in Saskatchewan that typically tend to be associated with some type of scam or fraud include direct sellers. Those are your door-to-door salesmen, which I think we can agree that over the past 15, 20 years, door-to-door sales aren't really necessarily a frontline means of selling your wares anymore, but this does still happen a fair bit. You've got your collection agents and your vehicle dealerships. So we're going to cover some of those, and we're going to talk about some tips and tricks so that you're ready if you have an interaction with any of these industries where it might not seem like it's on the level or it might seem like it's a scam. We want to stress that obviously not every door-to-door salesman, collection agent, or vehicle dealer is a fraudster, but there are unfortunately some of those who will take advantage of the guise of those industries in order to commit certain fraudulent acts. So the first one we'll look at are door-to-door salespeople, so your direct sellers. I'm sure some of you at some point have had someone come knocking on your door looking to sell a good or a service. I know for myself, years ago, I used to get people come to my door for just about everything: encyclopedias, knife sets, Bibles, anything you can think of. It used to be sold door to door. That's a little less prominent now, but we do still see a lot of companies looking to sell alarm monitoring services, furnaces, where you'll get the random person saying, hey, we sell furnaces. We're willing to give you a free furnace servicing to see what state your furnace is in, if you're willing to purchase from us if we find any problems. And that's kind of how they approach. So direct sellers, the legislation loosely defines it as a person who goes from house to house, selling or offering for sale or soliciting orders for the future delivery of goods or services. And interestingly enough, the legislation also defines that by telephone. So they can perform direct sales over the phone as well. Few tips that we can provide when interacting with a direct seller is that they do need to be licensed to operate in Saskatchewan. And this also extends to their salespeople. So even if the direct sales companies, so if I run a company called ABC Direct Sellers, all my salespeople need to be individually licensed as well. And they should be able to provide you evidence of that. So if you say, hey, what is your direct seller's license? Maybe the salesperson won't know, but they should be able to get that information for you. One of the biggest key points here, and this applies to all three of these regulated industries that we're going to look at, is that you need to take your time. You need to go slow, really take the time to read what's being put before you so that you can understand what you're signing and what you're agreeing to. Don't feel that you need to be in a rush. Bear in mind that if these folks are coming to your door to sell their goods and services, there's a pretty good chance you weren't looking for it in the first place. Because let's be honest, if you need groceries, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and you're going to go shop for it. If someone randomly came to your door and said, hey, I'm selling groceries door to door, are you interested? There's a good chance you probably don't need groceries at that moment. So take your time. Don't forget that it's your house and it's your choice. So make sure that you read everything completely. Ask to see materials ahead of time. Don't feel that you should be rushed, and direct sellers should never require cash only from you. Okay, there should always be that opportunity for differing methods of payment. Feel free to research the supplier. The truth is that if a direct seller really wants your business and they want to sell their goods and services to you, they're not going to be set off by the fact that you say, you know what, I'd like some time to look into your company and see about the product you're selling. Would you be able to leave me some literature and come back tomorrow? Okay, if their answer is, nope, this is a standing offer. If I leave right now, the offer leaves with me, chances are you should probably just back away from it. Don't be afraid to get help from friends or family to be certain that you understand your contract. I mean, contracts are usually pretty long, pretty complicated. A good example I always like to use is the last time you purchased a cell phone. When was the last time you read the terms and conditions before you signed them? The vast majority of people will admit that they don't read these documents, they simply sign them. The problem with that is that once you've signed, it can be much more difficult to get out of it than it would be had you just read it and been unsatisfied with the terms and conditions and not signed in the first place. As I mentioned earlier, make sure that you're not pressured to buy right away. It's easier to take a step back and take a little bit of time to consider your options. than to agree to be polite or because they're being pushy and you sign on it just to get them away from your door. And then next thing you know, you're trying to cancel, and that can be a much more involved process than just not signing in the first place. Now, that being said, the Direct Sellers Act does give you a right to cancel your transaction anytime for up to 10 days after you receive a copy of your contract, and you don't even need to explain why. But depending on the totality of the situation, there can still be difficulties getting out of that contract. So those are just things to bear in mind here for direct sellers. Next, we'll take a look at collection agents. So hopefully no one's had the misfortune of having to deal with a collection agent, but typically a collection agent is someone who'll collect or who'll offer to undertake the collection of a debt for others. So for banking institutions or businesses where you may have financed a loan or things of that sort. This usually takes place by way of phone calls to the person that's collecting on behalf of the one who the debt is owed to. So much like door-to-door salesmen, collection agents in Saskatchewan do need to be licensed to carry on as a collection agent. And they do have a number of things that they're actually not permitted to do. So they're not supposed to be calling you at such a frequency as to constitute harassment. So if they're calling you every 5 minutes, and you're actually making contact and you're answering the phone with them and you're telling them, okay, listen, I just spoke to you 5 minutes ago. You got to stop calling me. Under our provincial legislation, that's a prohibited act. Now, 2 phone calls doesn't quite trigger it. It can be a little bit subjective to the situation, but obviously if they're calling more than what's reasonable, this is something that our office would intervene with. So if they're calling you, however, and they're not reaching you, it can be reasonable for them to be trying a little bit more often, but it's that contact with them that makes a difference. First and foremost, if you get a phone call from a collection agent, they should be identifying themselves. They do have certain key pieces of information they do have to provide you, so they have to identify themselves, what collection agency they work for, who the creditor that they're collecting on behalf of, and what the balance of your debt is. So this is mandatory information that they do need to give you. If they're refusing to provide that, they're contravening the Collection Agents Act. So this is something that you would be able to provide to us for follow-up on. Another point is, as with everything else, you should never provide your banking information or your credit card information over the phone, even if a collection agent says, hey, you can pay right now by credit card. If they've called you, you shouldn't be taking that chance. Your credit card information should never be shared over the phone. If anything else, a good line that my mother always likes to use if she has a situation like that is she says, you know what, I'm not sure where my credit card is. Let me hang up. I'll go locate it and I'll give you a call back here in a few minutes. If they've provided you what collection agency that they work through, you should be able to look up that number and call them directly to confirm that it was actually a valid collection agent that contacted you. Some prohibitions, collection agents are not actually supposed to contact you on Sundays. They're not supposed to contact you on statutory holidays. And they're also not supposed to contact you between the hours of 9 p.m. in the evening and 8 a.m. in the morning. So these are all things to ensure that they're not hitting that harassment threshold. So those are some tips and tricks for collection agents. Next, we'll look at vehicle dealers. I'm sure all of you have heard the line that, yeah, he's as slippery as a car salesman, right? So the idea there is that vehicle dealerships are a regulated business in Saskatchewan as well. An actual reputable vehicle dealership does need to be licensed through our office to sell vehicles to consumers. And in fact, that is the definition of a vehicle dealer, or we'll just call them dealers, is a person or a business carrying on the business of vehicle dealership and sells vehicles directly to consumers, mostly for profit. So the key thing there is, obviously with vehicles, you enter in what's called a vehicle sales contract. We call it the bill of sale. So when you get that bill of sale, it's the same as with any other contract. You should be reading that document line by line to make sure that you understand all the pricing, all the terms and conditions, and anything and everything that might be attached to the purchase of that vehicle. So some things to bear in mind is to be mindful of hidden fees. Now, there are some fees that will generically show up on a vehicle's bill of sale. Most dealerships have a documentation fee that gets charged. Sometimes, depending on the financing company you go through, there may be a a financing fee that's imposed by the financial institution that you're getting your loan through. So those might appear. But if you're seeing differing things that you didn't ask for, like there's a few $1,000s for an extended warranty package that was never discussed and you didn't ask for, it's really important to look at that document ahead of time so that you can identify those things and flag them for the dealership and say, I didn't ask for this. Why is this on here? And a dealership should never be telling you, well, if you want to buy the vehicle, you have to get this warranty with it. That's not a thing. Financing companies won't force that either. That's a line that we've heard on occasion. Those are all ways of getting more funds out of the consumer when they're purchasing a vehicle. Don't feel pressure to purchase those extra coverages or packages. So they're always going to try, right? They're going to say, well, can we interest you in a detailing package? We'll wash and buff your car and shampoo all the interiors and armor all the tires for you. It'll only cost you $1,000. Don't feel that you need to say yes to any of those. I just purchased the vehicle actually 3 weeks ago, and I told the salesman straight up and straight out, I want the purchase price plus taxes and your documentation fee. If you can guarantee me that on the bill of sale, I'll buy this car today. And he said, okay, done deal. And then they still tried afterwards. They said, well, it is a used vehicle. Maybe you'd be interested in a warranty package just to protect yourself. And I said, no, I'm not interested. And I just held my ground. So I was able to avoid those additional fees. So not all these fees are fraudulent or an attempt at a scam. You just need to be aware that sometimes they might make their way on your bill of sale and you might not notice it. Anytime that you purchase a vehicle, vehicle dealers do have to provide you with all the material information about that vehicle that's known or that ought to be known by the dealership. So if it's been in prior collisions, if it's got any damages or any mechanical deficiencies that are pre-existing on the vehicle, they need to let you know about all of those before you purchase the vehicle. This allows you to make an informed decision as to whether or not you're going to buy that vehicle. In the case of a used vehicle, they are obligated by legislation to provide you with a printed VIN search from SGI that shows you the collision history of that vehicle. And if the vehicle has come in from out of province, they need to provide you some substantiating and verifiable document that shows the vehicle history from that other province. Carfax is a good example. And those are all the tips and questions I have here. I believe I'm turning it over here to Harvey.
Thanks, Shawn. So moving forward here, we're going to talk a little bit about scams and spotting the scams. So we're going to share some examples of a common scam and ask you to identify, of course, the red flags. We're going to discuss how to protect yourself from scams. And as always, the first step in stopping a scam is spotting it. So um,
I'm just going to interrupt here real quick. Sorry, Harvey. There was a few people who joined a bit late, so I just wanted to say that after Harvey and Shawn share their example of the scam, you can either unmute yourself or type in the text chat to participate in the discussion if you would like.
okay, let's keep going here. Thanks, Mana. So I'll give you an example here. A telemarketer promises you anything from prizes to cheap vacations and returns on investments. So, keeping this in mind, Lana gets a call from an excited telemarketer who is offering her a cheap vacation booking rate. The telemarketer says it's an opportunity offered only to some of their most valued customers and frequent flyers for a limited time only. All Lana needs to do to claim the offer is provide her credit card and her birthday over the phone. What are the red flags? I see no questions at this point, so maybe what I'll do is just kind of bring out the red flags and so we're all getting on the same page. So again, the telemarketer promising you anything from, the prizes, cheap vacations, fantastic returns on investments. These things are often quite labeled as, time limited offers and you must commit on the spot. Um, a lot of times the person calling will say like this is kind of a secret, so you need to keep it, real quiet. It's, very limited. You might get bombarded with details that are just overwhelming and may confuse you. Um, Low interest rate on credit cards. That's another thing that can be a scam. And a con can also involves people pretending to be from your bank claiming, um, your account is at risk and, you need to provide your banking information, your card number, your password so they can verify it. So, um, those are some of the things that we look for. Any questions at that point? Yeah, I think I'm turning it back over to you, Shawn.
Okay, so pretty popular scam nowadays is the relative in trouble, and this one's near and dear to me because this one actually happened to my mother. So I'm going to tell you the story of what happened to my mother because it's actually quite similar to the narrative we have there on the slide. So years ago, when I was still with the RCMP, I was stationed in Kinnersley, and ironically, I was on coffee break with several of my colleagues in full uniform. I was working, and I get a phone call from my mother asking me if I'm okay. I said, of course I'm okay. I said, why would you ask? And she says, well, I just got the oddest phone call. So then she walked me through what had happened. She had been sitting at home and she got a phone call. And when she picked up the phone and said, hello, a male voice on the other end said, Mom. And it sounded off. So she goes, Shawn. So now all of a sudden, this caller has my name and acknowledges the person he's speaking to is my mother. So that was their in. It's just that easy. So then he says, yeah, Mom, listen, I'm in trouble. I've been arrested. Um, According to this caller, I was in Edmonton. I was out at a bar. I got into a fight with a bunch of people and got my nose broken, which is why my voice sounded different. And the Edmonton Police Service had arrested me. And because I had lost my wallet, I had no money to bail myself out. And I needed her to wire me $5,000 to get released on bail by Western Union. My mother right away had no reason not to believe it. She's like, well, what? Well, she did question a couple of things. She's like, well, what are you doing in Edmonton? Oh, I just came up here for the weekend. I was with some friends. Some shit went down and I got into a fight. I really need this money to get out. Can you please bail me out? Because I have no one else to call. So of course, being a mother, right away, she got all the information for the Western Union wire. She hung up the phone, got her coat on. She was about to head out the door when she suddenly stopped and all of a sudden some of the red flags started going off in her head. And she's like, hold on here. Maybe I should call Shawn's cell phone and just see if he picks up. So luckily she called my cell phone and sure enough, I picked up and that's where I got the call from her asking me if I was all right. So I walked her through it and I explained to her, I said, yeah, you should never, ever, ever provide any information. You should never wire money from a relative who's requesting it. Like that's not something that I would ever do. So you need to be cognizant of that. I'll never ask you for money over the phone. Um, but there are a significant number of red flags there. So usually they'll target seniors because obviously grandmothers and grandfathers care a great deal for their family members, right? They're basically the head of their family. They'll always want to help. So usually these people will try to pose as a grandchild. They'll get you to guess their first name first, like they did with my mother. Okay, they'll use fill in the blank tactics, and once they get that name, now they've got that in and they can start using against you to carry out their scam. They'll always say that they're in some kind of legal or financial trouble, and that usually triggers the need for money. They'll plead with you to wire the money immediately. It'll always be some kind of a high pressure, immediate problem. Hey, I'm in jail. I can't spend the night here. I need to be bailed out right now, that kind of thing. Sometimes, as opposed to posing as one of your relatives, they might pose as a police officer or a lawyer or someone of authority to try and say, listen, your son's been arrested. He needs money to get bailed out. Are you able to wire money for him? That kind of thing. And most of all, they'll usually ask you not to tell anyone, especially other relatives, because they don't want someone else poking holes in that story and preventing it from happening, right? So good ways to protect yourself is just to make sure that you never share out any information over the phone to a caller. Even banks and financial institutions have made it clear for years that they'll never do this. If they're phoning you, they're not going to be asking you for personal information to confirm who you are. They'll always say, please call your bank branch to confirm your identity if they need to, but you should never be giving out your personal information over the phone. Always ask, who is this? Don't give them a name or an identity to fill in the blank for them. And don't be afraid to ask them personal questions that only that actual real relative would know. And then verify the caller's story by contacting the relative or calling your relative's friends and parents to confirm. So my mom did exactly the right thing. She phoned my personal cell. Had she not gotten a hold of me, she could have easily have called my wife and said, hey, where's Shawn right now? What's he doing? And my wife would have been able to say, hey, he's at work. He's here in Kindersley. And that would have completely caved in the story. So just be mindful. If you answer the phone, don't feed them information that they can use, because that's the new type of crime. That's how most of these frauds take place. Harvey, back to you.
Find uh my mic and my video camera. So this is another one of the you know questions where spot the scam. So in this particular example, Maggie gets a letter in the mail telling her that she's won a car in a contest. She can't claim her prize unless she sends $1,000 to the address on the letter on the letter to cover taxes. Maggie could really use a new car. Surely sending a letter to the address or asking for more details wouldn't hurt, right? What are the red flags of this? And we see this frequently, to be quite honest. I work in the securities division, so I work mostly with frauds relating to investments. But over the years, we have seen this. We get reports of it frequently. People will be cold called or be given emails, whatever, saying like you won a contest, collect your big money prize or whatever. And they'll say, but in order to do that, you have to pay some sort of taxes. So, to get your $500,000 or your brand new car, you need to send us money first, and to cover the taxes, then we can release your prize. Well, of course, really what they're doing is just trying to defraud you of your money, because there is no prize. And often tell people, when I've had calls or conversations about this, I ask them like, well, did you enter a contest? And I've never had the answer yes. Nobody's ever entered a contest, so I'm not sure what you can win that you don't enter. So it's definitely something that's out there, and it is quite concerning. And sometimes things just people are just out there to part you from your money. You can flip the slide, Lana. There, thanks. So just kind of following up the same story, like we don't pay to win or inherit money. Um, Never send money to somebody you don't know or trust. And if it's too good to be true, well, it really is too good to be true. And you have to work as hard at protecting your money as these people are working at trying to take your money from you. So um, at this point in time, if there's any questions, you can raise your hand or just send it off to Margarita. I'd love to, give you some more feedback, but, we can save it for the end, and I'm more than happy to answer questions after.
All right, thank you, Harvey. So another common scam that we're seeing a lot more of nowadays is romance and dating scams. So nowadays, of course, everything is done by the internet, and that includes getting into romantic relationships. The days of seeing someone in the coffee shop from across the room, smiling at them and buying them a coffee are a little less prominent. People have a tendency now to join these dating apps and these dating websites. So I'll read the example on the slide there. So Jennifer's husband passed away 3 years ago, and she's ready to try dating again. After she opens an account on a popular dating website, she begins talking with a handsome man named Dylan. After a few weeks of whirlwind online courtship, Dylan calls Jennifer claiming she needs to send him $10,000 for an emergency expense. Significant number of red flags there. So first of all, anyone you meet in the online community, you need to bear in mind that you have no, until you've met them in person, you have no genuine way of verifying their identity. So you don't know who it is you're actually talking to. The scammer will usually claim to have intense romantic feelings. It's instant love. They're over the moon for you, and they'll talk about big future plans like traveling and taking trips together, meeting in person. But yet, somehow in the short term, they'll suddenly and quickly have some kind of a crisis that requires some major amount of money right after establishing a relationship with you. And that should be the biggest red flag right then and there, because picture getting romantically involved with someone and a week later they're asking you for thousands of dollars. Like, my wife and I dated for about 6 months before she moved in, and even once she was moved in, she had a couple of times where she was having difficulty making her car payment and she wouldn't even ask me for money. And this was the woman who lived with me. So just imagine someone you don't even know through an online community and they're already asking you for money in that short term, right? Uh, as with anything else, they might ask you to keep the relationship a secret and to keep the ask for money a secret. Well, anytime that it's a romantic relationship where they're asking you to keep it secret, that's not a good thing, right? It's very unhealthy, and that's an indicator of a fraud. So a few tips and tricks for that romance and dating scam is to make sure that you never give out your financial information, either through an email, on an online chat, over the phone, none of that. You need to be careful about what kind of personal information you share through that online platform. Uh, this is always something that you should be doing with the person once you meet them face to face, especially sites like Facebook that can do information phishing or targeted scams and stuff. Make sure that you're using only reputable and verifiable dating websites, stuff that, you can verify them through various platforms on the internet. Be suspicious when you're meeting someone recently and all of a sudden they're asking you for money. That's not a common thing and it's not normal, so it shouldn't be happening. And beware of people in your life who are pressuring you for that money, right? Because pressure is usually a sign of fraud or abuse. Realistically, if someone is looking for help, they're going to ask for the help. If that help involves money, they're going to understand if you're unable to help them. But if they're pressuring you, oh, come on, I know you've got the money, that's a big red flag. And be sure that you reach out to people you know well and trust for their advice and input. Like, sometimes a fresh set of eyes can help you to realize whether this is a scam or if it's something that you should be wary of. So don't be afraid to reach out for help. Harvey, back to you.
Okay, I'll read. Hey, I'm back. I'll read the example and then I'll kind of talk about it a little bit further. So, in this particular spot, the scam, it's called friend of a friend. So, Jack and Jane are very active in their local church. One day at church, a friend brings cousin Bob to the church lunch. Bob informs the couple that he's trying to set up a new business venture. Would they consider using their position in the church to help him recruit new investors? Bob claims the couple will be rewarded handsomely, and he wants to offer the investment opportunity to people who share their values. And it says, what are the red flags? So I want to go a little bit further on this one. Uh, there's a number of things that come out here. So what we refer to this in my investigation group, it's technically called an affinity fraud. So it's a fraud that occurs within a tight-knit group. There's an individual, and he solicits the people within this tight-knit group to invest with them. Now, they normally do invest, and quite often we find out later, like well, I'd say 90% of the files I've worked over the years, it's a fraud, but the victims were all, within this small group of people. It's not uncommon. Uh, and it's like every other time, my advice to people always is like, don't be pressured. Really understand what you're investing in. And one of the other things that anybody who issues securities in Saskatchewan. There's a registration element that we're going to reinforce later on in the presentation. Um, so you should always make sure you're dealing with somebody that's registered. And as I said, I've seen this countless times, and it can be just devastating for people to have their money stolen, not only, just losing their money, but to also have it done by somebody from their group who they trusted and thought, they were um, doing the right thing. So I'm just going to keep going here. So again, it's on the slide, but you have to be very wary of people that are um, making an investment opportunity that's exclusive to a group. Again, don't be pressured. Consult with your lawyer, your bank, an accountant, um, your financial advisor before making investment decisions. And you can always contact our office as well. Lana will probably be providing that information later because we're quite happy to check and see if that particular individual is properly licensed to provide those investments. And we'd rather help you protect your money because most of the time, once you've given the money away, there's just no way of getting it back. So,
Thank you, Harvey. All right, so next we're going to look at internet scams. So obviously the online world is the most prominent way to do business, seek information, all those good things. It's never been easier to have the world's information at your fingertips within seconds. Whereas even when I used to go through school, we just started seeing the first emergences of the internet, where it took like 15 minutes to find even the most basic thing. Now everybody's carrying the World Wide Web in their pocket on every cell phone, and they can look up the world's information at their fingertips. So it stands to reason that this would be a targeted environment for scammers and fraudsters. So one good example of it, which is on the slide there, Harold is a movie buff, and one day he gets an email from a company with the subject line, "Download movies for free." Harold clicks on the link in the email and is taken to a website. A flashing pop-up ad tells him, "Click here to download free movies." Now Harold wants to download that movie to watch with his grandfather and clicks on the button. So what would be some red flags of that? Well, first and foremost, nothing in this world is for free. I'm sure we can all agree to that. So if it says movies for free, either it won't be free or it'll be something fraudulent, or they're providing you movies for free illegally, which is an entirely different thing. But fraudsters can send a link to a scam pop-up, and through email or through pop-up ads or sites that you may visit, they'll promise free products or great deals. Um, there'll be certain things to watch out for, like a lot of these fraudulent sites or scams will have spelling errors, or they'll look off in some way, or the grammar doesn't make sense. In cases like that, it may be a scam email. You need to be wary of unsolicited offers in your email box. Like, not a week goes by where I don't get emails from Shoppers Drug Mart, Home Depot. There's a couple of other ones here. I think Best Buy is another one where I'm getting emails from these locations telling me that, yeah, you won a $500 gift card for your recent purchase. Haven't purchased from there in months, right? So there's a lot of targeted scams of that nature. Now, even just clicking on any of these things, even opening an email that you don't recognize, by opening that email, that allows scammers to install viruses on your device that might allow them to access all your personal information, or to put it on your computer. Clicking links and being directed to an unfamiliar website or something. Those can all be issues that can be caused if you open up some of these things. So next slide, please, Lana. So for internet scams, a couple of things you can do to protect yourself is just delete the emails. Don't even open them or reply to them. If it's someone you know, I don't know anyone that I know that has sent me an email that hasn't sent me a text message or given me a phone call and just said, "Hey, Shawn, just an FYI, I sent you an email here about the discussion we had today." Okay, that's the normal way that things will happen. If you see emails from a company or with a subject line that relates to something that has nothing to do with you, those are all red flags that you should be keeping an eye on. So just delete those emails. If you get pop-up ads that come up on your device or on your computer while you're surfing the web, don't click on them. There's usually always that little X up in the corner that you can click on to just close them out. So just close out those pop-up ads without clicking on them. And then, of course, with your email has certain built-in protections that you can set for yourself, spam filters, junk filters. You can block certain addresses. So these are all steps that you can take to make sure that you act.
On this thing.
Oh, sorry. Okay, just forgot to mute her mic there, I guess. But yeah, these are all steps that you can take to protect yourself to make sure that you don't fall victim to a scam. If you do decide to make an online purchase, make sure it's via a secure website. So there are ways to make sure that it is a secure website. So if you look at the address bar at the very top of your web browser, most internet addresses will have HTTP at the beginning of it. If it's a secure website where you can make payment without worry about your personal information or your credit card information being in danger, it'll say HTTPS instead of HTTP. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. Harvey?
Okay, this is something I really want to talk about because it's in the spotlight, it's in the media. Um, the slide basically goes on and says like cryptocurrency is a type of virtual currency. So it's and the scams, it's dramatically on the rise. Um, I probably at this point with my investigators are putting 70% of my resources in to cryptocurrency frauds that are occurring every day in Saskatchewan. So that just shows the rise, and we're not alone. It's worldwide. Um, Across Canada, it's booming, and it's a huge concern for us. Um, they lure you with, you know, potentials of high returns and the thing with crypto currencies, and there's a number of them. There's Bitcoin, which has been in the news, and people have seen where it's gone from $1,000 to $30,000 virtually overnight, and it drops. And there's a number of those type of things. A lot of cold calls, a lot of unsolicited emails. Um, People wanting you to invest, buy cryptocurrency and invest with them. They'll trade it for you. One of the big ways that these companies are currently um, targeting people is through social media. So if you do have a Facebook page, perhaps, and you're Googling one day and you're looking for something, thinking, well, you know, what different investment opportunities or something. Next time you go onto your social media, um, because of the way they work together, you'll start getting the pop-up ads for invest in crypto, come to our trading platform, uh, and the likes of that. And that's one of the ways that they're drawing people into it. So again, uh, because of the amount and billions of dollars that are being lost annually to cryptocurrency scams. I really wanted to focus on this. My office spends a lot of time dealing in this area, and it's a concern for me. It's a concern from every regulator and police, Canada-wide, worldwide. So that was something I, kind of passionate about. So um, I really wanted uh, to bring this out and highlight it. It's a huge concern for me. So a couple other factors, and this works into crypto. It actually works into everything. Warning signs or takeaways from investing. Um, Anytime you're asked to keep an investment secret, like don't tell your family, don't tell your friends, whatever, huge red flag. Um, it's almost guaranteed that if you're receiving that type of thing, when you're investing it, somebody's out there attempting to part you with your money. Um, Huge returns. When you start seeing uh, somebody offering astronomical returns, um, we've seen them in the past a year or so here, and it was involving some cryptocurrency where they were offering to pay 3% per week return. Well, once you start to calculate that and everything else, it was unrealistic. It was expected to be around 300 plus percent annual returns, once it was compounded and everything else. Well, it's unrealistic. So I'm sure everybody knows currently what they're making on their investments, and it's a little rocky right now. Our funds are, slowly starting to perhaps move back up into the positive area. But if you see somebody out there that's offering, a return on your investment that's far outside what currently the market's doing, I guarantee that's a huge red flag. There is no business plan out there where you can do that. So, um, excuse me. So I'm more happy to have people contact my office and, discuss with myself or one of my investigators, what they've been offered, to have us take a look at it first because, I'd sooner prevent people from taking your money than try to, tell you bad news later that I just can't get it back because it's gone. I think you can move ahead, Lana.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. So signs for loved ones and caregivers. So, and again, this very scenario here happened to an aunt of mine back in New Brunswick, and I have a lot of personal stories. It might be the French Acadian in me, but it makes for some great discussions. So, as it says on the slide there, a new friend, and you'll notice it says friend in quotation marks, starts making financial decisions and suddenly has a power of attorney over one of your loved ones. And this is exactly what had happened to my aunt. In my aunt's situation, uh, she met this guy that lived a couple of houses down from her. She never knew him prior. She'd only known him for a week or two. And it took a couple of months before we realized that like he was paying her bills, he was making financial decisions for her. And when we looked into it and we actually ended up talking to her about it, she says, well, he was so helpful and he was helping me with everything and he really seems in good control. So I signed over my power of attorney. And it was like it blew us away. And we did end up getting the police involved on that one. And luckily she was able to get out of that situation before any damage was done. But you'll see some of this where there might be suspicious signatures on checks. There might be changes in banking habits. And typically banks will be pretty good at flagging suspicious or unusual activity. Uh, Even something just as simple as 2 years ago when I purchased my last laptop, because of the amount, they gave me a phone call. They said, hey, we're just checking in and making sure that you actually made this purchase. So some banks will proactively watch for that kind of stuff, but some of them don't. So if you notice certain changes in banking habits or you see significant behavioral changes, because once that other person has control of your finances, and you suddenly decide you want it back and they're not giving it to you, that can have a major emotional impact on you as well. So loved ones and family members might start to see some of those behavioral changes. Um, usually, usually it'll be a sudden appearance. This person came out of nowhere, um, or a family member several branches over that typically doesn't have any interactions with the immediate family, and all of a sudden they're claiming right of possession to that person's finances. Um, there'll be there'll be non-sufficient fund payments or bills will get missed or weird inconsistent transactions that wouldn't have been noted by that person before, or they'll suddenly withdraw a large sum of money because they want that cash, right? So they'll take it all out. Um, and yeah, you'll see weird behavioral changes in the person, and you might see checks, financial documents, or even contracts will have been entered into on that person's behalf with signatures that don't belong to them. So those are good points to watch out for. So we'll move on to the next slide. So wrapping it up, some of the key points that we've covered off on a lot of our previous slides here is you should never have to pay to claim a prize or any winnings. There's no such thing as winning something where you have to pay for it. If you have to pay for it, it's not a prize and you haven't won. You're also not going to win a prize without actually entering something. So having someone say, hey, we pulled your name at random and you're the winner. No, I'm not, because I didn't enter my name into it. So always be wary and suspicious of those things. Make sure that you never send money to someone you don't know or someone that you've only met online. We still live in the real world. Um, the advent of AI and online bots and things of that sort can make it pretty difficult. If you're chatting through an online forum, it can be difficult to tell if you're even talking to a real person or not. So you want to make sure that you're never sending money to anyone that you're talking to online. Legitimate organizations or individuals will never ask you for gift cards as a payment. And that's a big one because we see that one with a lot of scams and frauds. So if your bank contacts you and says, hey, we've noticed some suspicious activity on your account, we're investigating and we're trying to determine if this person is taking money out, can you make a withdrawal and put it on a gift card and give us the gift card number? How does that make sense, right? But some of these scammers will try tactics like that and they make it sound so convincing that sometimes it can be easy to fall for those. So in cases like that, you're like, you know what? Let me hang up. I'll give you a call back and then call your bank yourself and not at a number that they provide. Look up your bank's number and call them on your own. Before considering any investment opportunity or buying a product or service that you're unsure of, talk to someone you trust, whether it's a member of your family, a loved one, a lawyer. Talk to your accountant. Get advice from someone else that can give you that added set of eyes to look at the scenario objectively and just say, you know what, this sounds a little bit fishy. Maybe you shouldn't pursue it. Because scammers will often say that the opportunity is only available for a limited time, and that should never be the case. If someone genuinely wants to sell their goods or service, they're not going to put a time cap on it because they'll take that sale whenever they can get it. So, but they do that to entice you into making a hasty decision and just signing up for it right now, whether it's a fraud or not, right? There's a reason that that classic saying is a classic saying. If it's too good to be true, there's a pretty good chance that it is. Harvey?
Okay, keep going here. So just want to explain to everybody, fraud can happen to anyone. Um, Often people are reluctant to report fraud. Um, with just quite a lot of emotions to fraud. So I actually want to talk about some cases that I worked over the years that I investigated, um, just to give you an idea of what we've seen in some varieties here. So if we can here, so this one I worked a number of years ago. So we had up in the northern part of Saskatchewan. Two brothers, they were both bachelors. They'd farmed together their entire lives. Did very well. Um, so they got kind of hooked up with this, call him a con artist, call him a pure fraudster, um, just not a good guy. And he would come basically every 2 weeks out to the farm, and he talked to him about his latest great investment opportunity and all these wonderful things he was doing and all the rest of it. And he would con them out of, a little bit of money at a time. Sometimes it was $1,000. On a couple occasions, it was $50,000 in one shot. Uh, Now, the fellow the interesting part of this one is once he had the checks, he would actually go into town and would go to the bank where these two fellows banked at and would immediately cash the checks there and or have them turn into uh, a counter check or a bank draft, and off he'd go. So that was his routine. Um, we never did identify a bank account that this individual actually had. Um, but this went on for about 10 years. Now, I became aware of it um, from a family member saying, like, something's happening with my uncles, and we're not sure what's going on. They were reluctant to talk to anybody at the time. So, tried phoning them a few times, and it wasn't very successful. So, I decided one day, well, I'm just going to drive up there and I'll go out to the farm and I'll talk to them. I'll introduce myself. And I'm like, well, if I show up in person, they're not going to send me away. So they invited me in. We had coffee, and I started talking and raising my concerns. And they had been at that time. I think the figure might have been close to $1 million that they had been defrauded out of over about a 10-year period. Um, they never got their money back. It was gone. Uh, I guess the only positive that came out of it that we managed to send the bad guy to jail for 10 years. So, or not 10 years, 7 years we sent him to jail for. So, you know, not much of a win, but it was something that added a little bit of closure for them. So, it was actually quite an interesting file to work. Almost like, okay, I'm going to talk about another one. And this is again a file I worked a number of years ago. Um, So we had a lady, she was living in a seniors complex, very independent, here in Regina, and her children discovered that, I should back up a little bit. So she was very good friends with another lady that lived in the same complex, and at one point in time, the son of this other lady, moved in with his mom. Now he was probably about 20 years younger than our uh, our victim, but he quickly befriended her and um, all the normal things. He'd go over, play cards, and he talked her into putting a fax machine in her residence and on. And he matured this relationship over a period of time. So he then went to her and the common thing saying, look, I'm involved with this company out of Calgary. I'm making huge amounts of money with it. I want to get you involved with it. You can leave a nest egg for your kids or your grandkids. Like, I'll really help you out. So he went that way, and of course it was secret, like don't tell your family. Whatever you do, don't tell your family. You want it to be a surprise when they realize you've made all this great investing. So that's sort of where it went. It was one of those cases where she gave, my memory serves me, it was somewhere, um, she turned over between 50 and $100,000, which was a substantial amount of her savings. Like, she wasn't rich by any means or had a lot of disposable income, but she had been very comfortable up to that point. Very embarrassed to talk initially, but again, it was a case of where you just go to the person's home and introduce yourself and say, look, I understand things are going on. Also understand you're reluctant and, you know, don't be embarrassed. You know, it's not like being just robbed where you're upset and you're very upset. Fraud has another component to it. So you're not only being robbed, of course, it's a huge emotional drain on the person. It's an embarrassment. So I got the story out of her eventually, and I ended up getting some of these promissory notes as an individual giver. Um, so again, the money was gone, no way of actually getting the money back, but at least we were able to hold that person accountable and, make sure he was never going to be in a position again to do that kind of thing to someone. So, uh, never great outcomes. I guess it's the best we can offer sometimes, but that's why we promote, things like this so strong. And Shawn and I will make ourselves available. Uh, Education is so important to us. Like, we can't stop fraud, but we can sure, you know, work very hard to prevent and send a message and prevent people from being victims to it. So, uh, I guess this is your show.
Yep, thank you, Harvey. So this begs the question, what should you do if you find yourself being the victim of a fraud? Well, the big thing is to make sure that you collect your thoughts. So like I mentioned in the beginning when we were talking about the door-to-door salesman, the big thing is to take your time. Stay calm. gather all the information that you have about the fraud, all your documents, all your receipts, all your communications, that's email, text messages, any of that, anything that you might have gotten from them. Gather up all your information and remember as much as you can. The next step that you should do, especially if it involved providing credit card information or providing a check, is you should report that to your financial institution immediately. Your bank or your financial lender, they'll place flags on all your accounts. They'll help you to change all your passwords and stuff because any of that provided information can be used to access those additional funds. So you want to make sure that you protect your financials. Next, you should contact the police. We've provided a lot of good information here today, a lot of tips and tricks against scams and frauds, but the reality is a fraud in and of itself is a criminal offense, which is something that the police would investigate. So ultimately, if you suspect that you're the victim of a scam or fraud, you should be reporting the incident to your local police, get a file number from them because your financial institution may need that in order to process certain losses on your credit cards or any money you've lost out of your accounts. And if you find any suspicious activity on your credit report, you can update your file with the police. And if the outcome works in your favor and there's inaccurate information on your credit report, that's also something that my office regulates, Credit Reporting Act. Credit reporting agencies do need to be licensed in Saskatchewan, just like collection agents do. So it would be something that you can reach out to us for support and advice and stuff as well. And last but not least, you can report the fraud to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. The phone number is up there on that slide. What's good about the CAFC is that they maintain a database of all the active frauds that take place in the province, and what the layout of the scam is and how it works so that you know how to recognize them. They also have a website that you can visit. You can Google CAFC and you'll get their website. They have a lot of very useful information on there as well if you find that you've been a victim of a fraud.